While the John Mayer solo tour was primarily an acoustic tour, every night you'd get treated to a really awesome solo in the performance of Changing, where John would use the Silver Sky, and of course we also have different instances of him performing songs solo electric as well, much like the infamous, now at least infamous, performance of Gravity with the Black One returning for the first time since the summer of 2019 on stage with John. So I figured it'd be a really great time now that the second leg has concluded to go over John's amp rig in a little bit more detail, as well as share with you all some new details that we know of the amp rig, thanks to John posting a couple really awesome photos of the rig and the stage. So let's get right on into John's amp rig for the solo tour. One thing I do want you all to keep in mind when it comes to the amplifiers that John used for the solo tour is that for acoustics, John always goes direct, and that's kind of a different animal, to be honest. We're only talking about the electric portions of these performances in terms of the amplifiers. They weren't what were used for John's acoustic guitars. It was kind of a different thing, and maybe I'll cover that in a different video if you all would like me to discuss later on, but we're going to just focus on the two amplifiers in question. And for the whole solo tour, John stayed consistent, at least so far, with the amplifiers that he chose to use. The very first one being a Fender VI Verb from 1964, arguably my favorite amplifier that John has ever used. John has used a vintage VI Reverb all the way since just before the John Mayer Trio era, and I've done a whole video kind of doing a deep dive into John's history with this amplifier, really iconic performances that include this amplifier as part of the rig. I'll card that video up above and leave a link to the description down below, but that was one of the two amplifiers that John used for the tour. When it comes to the Fender VI Verb, however, this year, 2023, at the time of me making this video, John actually started doing something different with this amplifier that he hadn't done before, and that was actually miking the amplifier through an extension cabinet. Now, for the Love Rocks John Mayer Trio performance earlier this year, this was the very first time we saw John doing this, where the Fender VI Verb was ran and mic'd up through an Alessandro 212 cabinet as part of his 3-amp John Mayer Trio setup. And for the solo tour, it's the exact same story. The VI Verb physically sits on top of an Alessandro 212 cabinet, and that is actually what is mic'd up. Now, for the start of the solo tour, and at the very beginning, the VI Verb still had that JBL D130F speaker in it. And at some point, the speaker was actually removed, and thanks to this awesome shot we have of kind of the stage from the backside of it, you can see that the VI Verb just has no speaker in it at all, completely confirming that John was only running the amplifier through that Alessandro 212 cabinet. And thanks to the shot as well, we now know what speakers John was using in that Alessandro cabinet, and I've mentioned it before, but speakers aren't really my strongest area of expertise, I'll say. And my friend, the London guitarist, was able to help identify these speakers as being EV-SR012s, which, from what I've kind of researched, seem to be fairly rare speakers, but that certainly looks like as to what John is using in the Alessandro cabinet. So kind of an interesting dynamic overall, because the VI Verb, to me, a key characteristic of this amplifier is that 15-inch speaker, especially the JBL. It's a brilliant sounding speaker, but John choosing now to use this amplifier through a 212 cabinet is a really interesting move, and something that I would love to try with mine and just to kind of experience it in a bit of a different way. But as far as the VI Verb, that is what John has been doing with this amplifier. Some cool new things we're seeing from him, as well as just the JBL speaker being removed. Who knows why, but it just got removed at some point. The other amplifier that John is using for this amp rig is an amplifier that we're all familiar with at this point. It is his 50-watt Dumble Overdrive Special. This amplifier was originally one that was being used with Dead & Company, and even for the Dead & Company final tour this year as well. It's one of two amplifiers that John was using for that setup as well. So we've seen this amplifier a lot, and John really seems to be enjoying using it. Me personally, I'm always going back to those 100-watt overdrive specials like he was using during the John Mayer Trio era, earlier kind of heavier thing stuff as well a little bit, and of course on the Continuum record and tour as well. So it'd be really cool to see the kind of full-on 100-watt Dumble overdrive specials returning to part of the lineup. But for these shows as well, it just kind of makes sense that he'd use the 50-watt overdrive special as well, paired with the Reverb. Obviously, it's sounding absolutely fantastic. And the cabinet that John is pairing with the Dumble Overdrive Special is a bit of a surprise to see returning to his amp rig, and it is a 2-Rock 212 cabinet. Now, I say it's a bit of a surprise because at the kind of end point of the Continuum era, John had phased out using these 2-Rock cabinets in favor of the Alessandros, and then we never really saw them returning to the stage again. But this year as well, another surprise addition was the return of these 2-Rock cabinets. And aesthetically wise, I always love them, especially because it really is the look and vibe as far as the amp rig is concerned of Continuum, and of course the John Mayer Trio as well. Just looking at shots of John's amp rig as well, I think aesthetically it's just very pleasing to the eye to see the ODS on top of a tall vertical cabinet, especially when the Reverb is sitting on top of the 212 and then very high up. If John was using something like the J-Mod cab or something like that, or another Alessandro where it's vertical, it'd look maybe not as cohesive perhaps, and maybe that has some small thing to do with the amp rig. Of course, John choosing to use as well 2 open back cabinets where the J-Mod cab, the 212 at least, is closed back as well, so maybe some choice there as well in terms of the actual cab construction. When it comes to the speakers that are in the 2-Rock cabinet, this is where things get a little bit tricky. Again, as I mentioned, speakers aren't really my kind of main thing, to be honest, that I've ever been super into or diving down a rabbit hole on. It's never been really my thing. I've seen that Celestion Neos, like me and my friends when we were talking, that kind of seemed to be something we were considering. Jensen Neos as well. It's very hard to tell from this shot too, just what these might be. So if you have any idea what the speakers that are in the 2-Rock cab are, let me know in the comments down below, because I'm trying to learn more about speakers, and from right now I'm having a very hard time figuring out what John is actually using in these 2-Rock cabs for the solo tour, but to me it does kind of look like some sort of Neo speaker. Now, besides just learning about the speakers that John is using for the solo tour in this shot, which by the way is from the San Francisco show, if you look closely behind the 2-Rock cabinet, you actually see a 2-Rock amplifier. Now, this amplifier that John is using as a backup, obviously, is the 2-Rock Custom Reverb Signature number 83. This amplifier is a very special amplifier because it kind of is the genesis, if you will, of John's relationship with 2-Rock before they started prototyping and really thinking about building a signature John Mayer 2-Rock amplifier. This amp we actually have shots of John using at the very start of the John Mayer Trio era, and just think of it as a Custom Reverb Signature version 1 that was just purposefully built for John. But at its core, it's a Custom Reverb Signature version 1. And this amplifier we even saw John using during the television performances in promoting Sob Rock, where he performed Wild Blue, Last Train Home, things like that. We've also seen him using it for John Mayer Trio performances as well. And it's just kind of cool that John's bringing back this kind of old school 2-Rock rather than his own signature amplifiers. It's just cool to see him kind of changing things up. Maybe he's bored with his own signature amplifier, I don't know, but he's using this other version that obviously is a really special amplifier as well, and it's just cool to see things change up, and I'm here for that, seeing some different amplifiers kind of thrown into the mix here or there, but still kind of having some 2-Rock DNA in the mixture overall. I just think is awesome. So that was one really cool thing we got to see from this specific shot, where I was kind of like, oh wow, look at that. There's Custom Reverb Signature number 83 just tucked right underneath there, and we just got a glimpse of it in the shot. But yeah, that was pretty interesting to see nonetheless. So safe to assume that amplifier was probably used as a backup throughout the entire solo tour. And the solo tour's electric guitar tones overall I thought were just fantastic. John sounded and obviously played incredible, and this is just kind of a special amp rig because this tour has been so special, and it's pretty much safe to say it's going to be the amp rig as well that John will be using for the European part of the solo tour coming up in 2024. And if you haven't gotten a chance to see John live for the solo tour yet, I just encourage you to go out and see him if you can. These shows are incredibly special, as I've been covering some highlights of the tour. I went to the Vancouver show. phenomenal. One of my favorite Mayor shows I've ever been to, that's for sure. It was brilliant, and you guys will have a really great time if you haven't gone and seen one of these shows already. Thank you so much for watching today's video. The next one on the solo tour, I'm going to be breaking down the pedal board. As you can see in the shot here, we actually get a pretty good look at it right in the shot here, but I'm going to save that breakdown for a separate video, so please hit subscribe and ring that bell button as well to be notified when that video comes out if you aren't so inclined. And if you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate you. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.